I was reborn. The moment I opened my eyes, the ghastly white lights in the classroom made my eyes sting. The electronic clock showed June, and a banner about sprinting toward the college entrance exam still hung on the blackboard. Around me was the rustling sound of pages turning. The homeroom teacher sat at the podium grading papers. Everything looked perfectly normal, but I knew clearly that this world was already rotten. The bizarre apocalypse had descended as early as May 5 years ago. It was just that the impact was still small for now. Only a scattered few were being dragged into bizarre scenarios, and the vast majority of people were still in the dark, thinking life could go on as usual. In my previous life, I struggled to survive in this purgatory for 5 years. In the end, I was truly driven mad and charged alone into the legendary Underworld Bank, trying to rob the so-called trillion ghost coins. I had a spatial ring in my hand, a rarity among rarities, capable of swallowing countless things. But the moment I made my move, I triggered a restriction. The Ghost King swallowed me whole wrapped in hellfire. Before dying, in a fit of ruthlessness, I used the ring to suck the entire Underworld Bank into it, and then there was nothing after that. What a bitter injustice. I never expected that the moment I opened my eyes, I would be back. I subconsciously touched my finger, and my fingertips felt a trace of coldness. The next second, my heart started pounding wildly. The ring was still there. What made my scalp go numb even more was that when my mind swept through the inside of the ring, that eerie Underworld Bank stood intact within the space. On the shelves and in the vaults, the trillion ghost coins were stacked in neat rows, all available for me to use as I pleased. Starting off with 1,000,000,000,000 ghost coins. That's even more outrageous than a cheat. I had endured 5 years in the apocalypse and was no longer an ordinary high school student. Forcing down my excitement, I spent 5 minutes making myself completely calm. Having money was only the first step. In my last life, I died clutching a fortune of 1,000,000,000,000, only to be burned to ashes. Without strength, money alone would make me someone else's cash machine sooner or later. I still had 1 month. The bizarre influence would rapidly expand, order would collapse, and everyone would be in danger. In this 1 month, I would use ghost coins to buy enough bizarre scenarios, hire enough bizarre beings, stockpile enough items, and arm myself to the teeth. As I was planning, a scream suddenly exploded in the classroom. A girl, trembling all over, pointed at her desk, where a blood-red note had appeared out of thin air. At the same time, the same thing appeared on the desks of 2 other classmates. I lowered my head and saw that on my own desk, a blood-colored note was lying there quietly. Bizarre mission, midnight cafeteria. I smiled. What was meant to come would come. In my previous life, I also received this mission at this exact point in time. The mission description on the note was very detailed. Within the school late at night, there exists a cafeteria that opens at midnight. When the midnight bell rings, waves of a fishy stench drift out from the back kitchen, and plates of red dishes are set upon the tables. Dim candlelight flickers in the dining hall, waiting for a group of strange guests. You are a waiter at the midnight cafeteria. Please hurry to the school cafeteria before 12 midnight. Tardiness is a fault that cannot be forgiven. It was now 9:30 p.m., so there was plenty of time. The other 3 who had received the mission were all girls, each with a deathly pale face and trembling legs. One of them, Zhao Mingming, usually looked pure and cute. But at this moment, she was furtively glancing at me in a pitiable manner, her eyes like those of a startled fawn. Yi Chuxue from the same class was a bit calmer, but her lips were pressed so tightly they had gone white. Among the classmates in the classroom who had not been chosen, some quietly edged away, while others directly grabbed their bags and left, afraid of being tainted by bad luck. My deskmate was one of them. He looked at me with pity, then quickly put some distance between us. I didn't care, because this was human nature. Unfortunately, he didn't know that 2 weeks later, he too would receive a mission and then be torn to pieces by a fierce ghost. Midnight. The bell rang 3 dull chimes. The cafeteria doors were pushed open from inside, and a figure in a red uniform walked out. The female ghost manager had bloodstains not fully wiped from the corners of her mouth, and her pencil skirt outlined perfect curves. If not for the pungent smell of blood and those lifeless eyes, she would count as pretty. Her gaze swept over us and lingered on my face for 2 seconds. The others were trembling like leaves, while I alone remained expressionless. A trace of surprise flashed through her eyes, but she quickly returned to indifference. Work time has started. I am the manager of the Midnight Canteen. From now on, you must obey 3 rules. Her voice was like nails scraping across glass. First, the manager's orders must not be disobeyed and must be carried out faithfully. Second, those who come to spend are customers. You must treat customers politely, and no matter what requests they make, you must satisfy them unconditionally. Third, working hours are 2 hours, and during that time you are not allowed to leave the canteen. And you must not damage any canteen property, or you will be punished. After saying that, she turned and led us into the canteen. The stench of decay hit us head-on, and under the dim candlelight, several vicious ghosts, their bodies rotting all over, moved back and forth at the doors of the private rooms carrying red dishes. 3 minutes. Change into the waiter uniforms. In the changing room hung several uniforms, all more or less stained with dark red marks. I went in first and picked the cleanest one to put on. The others could only take what was left, and Zhao Mengmeng retched as she dressed. After changing clothes, the female ghost manager led us into a private room. A strange ghost was sitting by the round table. Half its head was gone, with rotting tissue exposed, and it was using broken fingers to hold a spoon, pouring a bowl of sticky red soup into its split-open mouth. The soup dripped from its chin onto the table, giving off a suffocating stench. "You, help me wipe up the soup that spilled out." The ghost raised half a finger and pointed straight at Zhao Mengmeng. All the color drained from Zhao Mengmeng's face in an instant. She instinctively looked at me, her voice soft and pitiful. "Chenmu, I'm so scared. Can you help me?" As she spoke, she even pressed herself against my arm. I expressionlessly pulled my hand back. In 5 years of the apocalypse, I had seen too many tricks like this. Using a bit of looks to make others into cannon fodder, then being the first to sell out teammates when something went wrong. I'm no saint. A flash of resentment crossed Zhao Mengmeng's eyes, but she quickly hid it and gritted her teeth as she walked toward the ghost. There was no rag around, so after hesitating for a second, she could only use her uniform sleeve to wipe away the soup bit by bit. The icy liquid soaked through her cuff, and the fishy stench was so strong, she almost threw up. After she finished wiping it clean, the ghost seemed very satisfied and took out a ghost banknote from its pocket to hand to her. "This is your tip." Zhao Mengmeng's eyes lit up instantly. What ghost banknotes meant in the ghost apocalypse was something everyone understood perfectly well. They could be used to buy your life from ghosts, evade rules, and even make fierce ghosts bow their heads. It was said that wealthy people outside had to pay $1 million just to get 100 ghost banknotes. Now she was clutching 10 ghost banknotes in her hand, as if holding an amulet against death. She shot me a smug glance, then swept her gaze over the other girls, the look in her eyes seeming to say, "I'm already on a different level from you." But inwardly, I only sneered. In the ghost apocalypse, there is no such thing as a free lunch. If you take a ghost's money, you have to pay the price. Zhao Mengmeng was happy too soon. Sure enough, the ghost picked up an empty plate and handed it over. "I've finished this dish, help me clear the plate out." Zhao Mengmeng was still immersed in the joy of getting ghost banknotes, and took the plate without any guard up, then turned to leave. The next second, the ghost quietly stretched a foot out from under the table and tripped her neatly at the ankle. Crash! The plate shattered into pieces. The private room door was suddenly shoved open, and the ghostly female manager walked in with a grim expression. When she saw the shattered pieces on the floor, blood seeped from the corner of her mouth again. "Who broke the plate? Damaging the restaurant's plates will be punished." Zhao Mengmeng collapsed on the floor, trembling all over. She instinctively looked at me. The plate had shattered right by my feet. Suddenly, a trace of malice flashed in her eyes, and she raised her hand to point at me. It was him. He broke the plate. I frowned. Framing me? This woman really doesn't know how to spell death. The ghostly female manager's voice turned even colder. "Are you taking me for a fool?" She pointed to the corner of the private room, where an eyeball-like object was staring fixedly at everything in the room. "Whatever you did, I saw it all clearly." With her attempt to shift the blame failed, Zhao Mengmeng completely panicked. She suddenly remembered something and fumbled to pull out that ghost money note, holding it up high. "I have ghost money. I'll pay. I'll pay for the broken plate." "Are you sure you want to use this ghost money to compensate the restaurant for the plate?" the female ghost manager asked. Yes. Zhao Mengmeng nodded frantically, as if clutching at her last straw. The manager accepted the ghost money. Just as Zhao Mengmeng was about to sigh in relief, the manager spoke again. "But your ghost money isn't enough. This plate costs 20 ghost money, and you only gave me 10 ghost money. If it's not enough, I'll need to use half of your body to settle the debt." Zhao Mengmeng's eyes widened, and fear and despair twisted her entire face. She finally understood that from the very beginning, the eerie diner had been toying with her, giving her ghost money, then deliberately tripping her, making her think she could pay with it and save her life, only for her to discover in the end that the money was nowhere near enough. From fear to joy, and then to utter despair, This was the spectacle the eerie being wanted to see. She slumped to the floor, and a puddle of liquid spread out from beneath her. The eerie being by the table clapped its hands in satisfaction, its rotten lips splitting back to its ears. It still wasn't satisfied. Then it turned to me, pulled another ghost money note from its pocket, and stuffed it into my hand without warning. Ha ha ha. This is your tip. The others all sucked in a sharp breath. They could tell that this eerie being wanted to keep playing, and that the next prey it had chosen was me. Although Zhao Meng Meng was sprawled on the floor waiting to die, when she saw that I had also been chosen, a flicker of glee actually flashed in her eyes. The eerie being picked up another plate and smashed it to the floor. With a loud clang, shards flew everywhere. It pointed at the fragments and said to the ghostly female manager, "This plate was broken. I want this waiter to pay for it." Yi Chushua finally couldn't hold back anymore. Her voice trembled, but she stubbornly spoke up. "Chen Mu didn't break this plate. Making him pay for it isn't fair." I glanced at her. This kind of sense of justice wouldn't survive a year in the apocalypse. But at least for this moment, she still dared to speak. The ghostly female manager was completely unmoved. Waiters must obey every command from the guests. If a guest breaks a plate and specifies that you must pay for it, then you must pay. Everyone's gaze focused on me. They probably thought I was as good as dead, headed for the same end as Zhao Mingming. Calmly, I held that ghost money note between my fingertips, my tone as placid as if we were discussing what to eat tonight. Of course, I have 10 ghost money in my hand. The ghostly female manager's voice was emotionless. 10 ghost money isn't enough. I know. I smiled, but I never said I was going to pay for this plate. The air in the private room suddenly froze. Everyone looked at me as if I were crazy. Not paying for the plate. Was I going to challenge the rules head-on? Blood began seeping from the corners of the ghostly female manager's mouth, her eyes glowing with an eerie red, and killing intent spread through the air. "If you won't pay for the plate, then you'll have to die." I spoke slowly. "I'm sick of high-end hotels. I've heard the small workshops use stronger ingredients. Bring me your menu. I want to order a dish and have a taste." As soon as he said that, the girls were completely dumbfounded. They thought I'd been scared silly. Why order food now? But the female ghost manager's expression changed instantly. Her pupils constricted slightly, and her gaze toward me grew wary. This is the way out at Midnight Cafeteria. Rule number 2 is written very clearly. Waiters must be polite to customers, and no matter what request a customer makes, it must be fulfilled unconditionally. Even the manager must satisfy the customer. And now I'm holding 10 underworld coins, so I'm fully qualified to be a customer of the cafeteria. I ordered food, so I'm a customer. As a customer, whether I smash a plate or do anything else, the manager and all the waiters must satisfy me and accommodate me. That eerie diner who deliberately set me up also has to stay put and behave. A hard rule of this eerie apocalypse. For every eerie mission, there is always a way out. And the way out is often hidden between the lines of the rules. I slowly looked at that eerie diner with half a face, a bright smile on my face. "Your little tricks aren't enough to impress me. What did you figure out?" The female ghost manager was somewhat uncertain, but the slightly panicked tone of her voice had already betrayed her. Chun Mu smiled faintly. "The way out of the mission is actually hidden in the rules you stated when the mission began." "Am I wrong, manager?" Rule number 2. Those who come to spend money are customers. Be polite to customers. No matter what requests customers make, they must be satisfied unconditionally. Even the manager must satisfy the customer. The customer only gave me 10 underworld coins as a tip, but the plate costs 20 underworld coins, which isn't enough to cover the compensation. If you directly use 10 underworld coins to compensate for the plate, then you're just waiting to die. Chen Mu, who had a slight dark humor streak, didn't forget to take a dig at Zhao Mingming at this moment. What seemed like an unsolvable dead end actually hinged on a leap in thinking, stepping outside the fixed mindset of being a waiter. Who says you can't change identities in an eerie scenario? Rule number 2 makes it very clear. If you are not a waiter but a customer, then it means you can make any request, including refusing to compensate for the plate. The method to become a customer was already embedded in the rules. The very first sentence of rule number 2, those who come to spend money are customers. If I spend money in the cafeteria, according to this rule, my identity can change into a customer. So the correct use of these 10 underworld coins is not to compensate for the plate, but to spend them. "Manager, bring me a plate of peanuts worth 10 underworld coins." As a customer, I demand to refuse compensation for the plate. After Chen Mu said that, he handed the 10 underworld coins to the female ghost manager. At this point, the female ghost manager's hanging heart finally died. She never imagined that such a young student could actually see through the hidden way out. How believable is that? JPG, is this your first time doing an eerie mission? The female ghost manager couldn't help asking. Yes, the first time in my life. Chunmu wasn't lying. This really was his first eerie mission after being reborn. Actually, this way out was something Chunmu figured out by reviewing the mission after he completed it in his previous life. Back then, that eerie diner killed 2 waiters in a row before stopping. Chunmu was relatively lucky and wasn't chosen, so he survived. But in other words, with the experience from his past life, even if Chunmu hadn't known in advance, he was still confident he could find the way out. It would just be a little more troublesome. Besides, Chunmu had 1 trillion underworld coins in hand, and he had originally planned to buy Midnight Cafeteria outright. In his eyes, Midnight Cafeteria was already his property. What was there to panic about? At worst, he'd just use brute cash power. I admit, you're very impressive. The female ghost manager took the 10 underworld coins, and her tone toward Chunmu became much gentler as well. People with ability and wisdom are respected wherever they go, and ghosts are no exception. Seeing this unbelievable scene on the ground, Zhao Mingming finally reacted. She hurriedly shouted at the female ghost manager, "Give me back my 10 underworld coins. I'm not compensating anymore, and I want to order food too. I also want to be a distinguished guest." However, the female ghost manager coldly refused her. "Your 10 ghost coins have already been given to me and cannot be refunded." The light of hope on Zhao Mingming's face dimmed, and resentment and despair once again surged onto her face, twisting it into something terrifying. She looked at Chunmu viciously and said unwillingly, "Chunmu, you already saw through the way to survive? Why didn't you tell me? You bastard." When she said this, she never thought about how she had tried to make Chunmu die in her place and wanted to frame him. Chunmu shrugged. "Why should I save you? What's more, you wanted me to die in your place and even tried to slander me. If one repays kindness with evil, how should kindness be repaid? Besides, the moment you framed me, your death was already destined. Rule 1. The cafeteria manager's orders must not be disobeyed. You must faithfully carry out the cafeteria manager's orders. When the cafeteria manager asked who broke the plate, you did not tell the truth, violating the rule of faithfully carrying out the cafeteria manager's orders, so you were already a dead person." After hearing Chunmu say this, Zhao Mingming was finally left speechless. Chunmu's words once again made the female ghost manager show surprise. She had not expected Chunmu to observe so carefully and to notice that Zhao Mingming had violated the first rule as well. Could such meticulous powers of observation really be something a student would have? On the other side, the others also came back to their senses. Such a certain death situation was actually solved so easily by Chunmu. Among them, the gazes of the 2 younger people toward Chunmu were filled with admiration. One could imagine that if not for Chunmu, who knew how many more people would have died here tonight. It could even be said that Chunmu had saved several of them. Just as the female ghost manager was about to leave, Chunmu suddenly stopped her. "Don't be in such a hurry to leave. I still have something to do." "What else is it?" The female ghost manager stopped, and her tone, when speaking to Chunmu, was much gentler than before. "Let the few of them avoid this for a while." Chunmu pointed at the girls, signaling for them to go out, then said to the female ghost, "Call your boss here. I have something I want to discuss with it," Chunmu said. "Boss." The female ghost manager showed an awkward expression. "Our boss does not appear easily. If you have any requests, you can tell me, and I will satisfy your requests. My appetite is huge, you can't satisfy it. For example, I want to buy your cafeteria." Chunmu's tone was calm, as if he were talking about some trivial matter. As soon as these words came out, the female ghost manager suspected she had misheard. For a moment, the female ghost was almost angered into laughter. She did not know whether Chunmu was ignorant or fearless. A mere human should count himself lucky just to stay alive, yet he still wanted to buy Midnight Cafeteria? It was simply wishful thinking. If someone else had said this, the female ghost manager would have rolled her eyes, flipped him off, and then looked for a chance to eat him. But Chunmu was still in the eerie mission, with the buff bonus of guest status. So the female ghost manager could only force a smile and give Chunmu the middle finger, then patiently explained, "Honored guest, the rules say that I must satisfy all your requests. But please note that if it exceeds my abilities, there is no way for me to fulfill it." In the female ghost manager's view, Chunmu was trying to exploit the rules, getting Midnight Cafeteria for nothing, making the female ghost manager hand the cafeteria over to him for free. This was obviously impossible. When the boss made the rules, it had already considered this bug, so it had the female ghost manager come out to explain the rules. The female ghost manager saying she has to satisfy them has nothing to do with me. The boss, right? However, Chun-Mu's next sentence shocked her even more. I know you don't have that authority, and you've misunderstood what I mean. What I mean is, I want to buy this cafeteria and give the boss a reason it cannot refuse. For example, ghost coins. The female ghost manager looked Chun-Mu up and down. She admitted that Chun-Mu's performance just now did show some intelligence. But no matter what, she could not believe that Chun-Mu had the means to buy Midnight Cafeteria. Although the Midnight Canteen is now poorly run and on the verge of bankruptcy, buying it would obviously be very difficult without 2 million ghost coins. 2 million ghost coins is simply an astronomical sum. Would this young man in front of him have 1 million ghost coins? No one would believe it if he said so. Was he trying to fool a ghost? Chun-Mu revealed a mysterious smile. He reached for the ring on his hand and slowly took out a stack of ghost coins from inside. That's right, Chun-Mu was about to use his money power. The Underworld Bank in the ring held trillions of ghost coins, which Chun-Mu could use at will. In the eerie apocalypse, there was no such thing as going to prison for robbing the Underworld Bank. The one who got it was the one who owned it. This was also why Chun-Mu had once fought to the death to seize the Underworld Bank. Seeing Chun-Mu take out a huge stack of ghost coins, the female ghost manager froze for a moment, then looked closely in disbelief. The ghost coins were wrapped in a strong aura of ghosts. At a glance, they were the real deal. This huge stack of ghost coins was at least 100,000. He casually took out 100,000. He really was that rich. Looking at Chun-Mu's calm demeanor, the female ghost manager immediately withdrew her middle finger. She believed it. This man in front of her might really want to buy the canteen. At this moment, her gaze toward Chun-Mu carried a more complicated emotion. Recently, the Midnight Canteen had fallen into hard times. The boss was so broke, he couldn't even pay wages. The female ghost manager's salary had been overdue for half a year, and the wages of the other ghost employees and cooks had been unpaid for over half a year as well. The 100,000 ghost coins Chun-Mu casually took out were enough for the female ghost manager's salary for 2.5 years. Her attitude toward Chun-Mu had already become respectful, her face full of smiles, even with a hint of ingratiating humility. She now regretted deeply why she had ever raised her middle finger. Honorable Mr. Chun, I am the canteen manager Li Xiaoxiao. Please wait a moment. I'll go call our boss right away. After speaking, Li Xiaoxiao pulled out the chair by the table, respectfully helped Chun-Mu sit down, then bowed to him and hurried off to fetch the boss. After Li Xiaoxiao left, the private room fell into silence. Chun-Mu sat there, and the eerie diner who had previously deliberately made things difficult for him also became extremely awkward. The Midnight Canteen is not very high-end now. The eerie beings who come here to eat are all poor ghosts with little money in their pockets. Seeing how rich Chun-Mu was, the eerie diner couldn't help feeling a twinge of fear, worried that Chun-Mu might spend money to buy its life. If that really happened, it would be finished. Thinking of this, the eerie being reached into its pocket, found a treasured cigarette it had kept for a long time, and offered it fawningly in front of Chun-Mu. Mr. Chun, I'm just a lowlife thug. I hope you can be magnanimous about what happened before. Get lost. Chun-Mu slowly spat out one word. The eerie being felt as though it had been granted amnesty. While frantically apologizing to Chun-Mu, it fled in utter disgrace. Chun-Mu had no intention of letting it go. It was just that he didn't yet have the strength, and he feared that pushing too hard would drive the other side into desperate resistance, putting Chun-Mu's life in danger. Once Chun-Mu bought the Midnight Canteen, he could just send any employee to kill this ghost and cut the weeds at the roots. As for Zhao Mingming, Chun-Mu had no intention of saving her. Let go of the savior complex, respect the fate of others, and by the way, praise the greatness of natural selection. Outside the private room, the few people who had been driven out to wait temporarily still felt somewhat unreal. What was going on? Weren't everyone supposed to be in an eerie mission? A mission full of danger, where you trembled in fear and carefully searched for a way out of danger. Why had the style suddenly changed once it got to Chun-Mu? They saw the private room door open twice. The first time, the female ghost manager came out with a fawning look on her face. The second time, the eerie diner was scared witless. Looking at it this way, it was almost as if Chun-Mu and the eerie ones had swapped identities. Chun-Mu was the eerie one, and the eerie ones were like people scared half to death. Just find a seat anywhere. You won't be in danger tonight. Chun-Mu opened the private room door and said to the girls. These people were all classmates, and Chun-Mu didn't have any grudges with them. These girls were pretty nice. They used to let Chinmu copy their homework, and class monitor Yi Chushua had even stood up for Chinmu just now. So naturally, Chinmu wouldn't make things hard for them. After all, Chinmu wasn't a psychopath, unlike that eerie creature just now, which took pleasure in making trouble for people. The girl sat in the lobby, looking at Chinmu with eyes full of gratitude and admiration. In their eyes, Chinmu's performance tonight was simply godlike. Not only had he easily found a way out, but he had also used some method to make even the eerie ones act extremely fawning toward him. Their familiar classmate had suddenly become mysterious in their eyes. A mysterious, strong person naturally attracts others' attention. Two of them wanted to strike up a conversation with Chinmu, but when they saw him close the door and go into the private room, they backed off. They felt that Chinmu wouldn't pay them any attention. After waiting about 5 minutes, the private room door opened from the outside, and Li Xiaoxiao walked in. Behind her was the owner of Midnight Diner. The owner of Midnight Diner wore a suit and tie on his upper body, and a hat, looking quite elegant. The only flaw was that there wasn't a bit of flesh on his head, it was a skull. The skull boss walked up, looking refined and courteous, and said to Chinmu, "Sir, I'm the owner of Midnight Diner. Are you the one who wants to buy Midnight Diner?" Chinmu nodded. The skull boss revealed a shrewd look and started sweet-talking Chinmu. "Mr. Chun, as you can see, although my diner is currently facing some difficulties in operation, please rest assured, the location of my Midnight Diner is excellent. You definitely won't lose out if you buy it. Think about it. With such a great location, if you later hire a few skilled chefs, wouldn't the business take off in no time?" The skull boss was a master of slick talk, full of deceptive words. He just wanted Chinmu to take over this place and become the sucker. But Chinmu knew that what the skull boss said was actually true. In his previous life, the skull boss couldn't find anyone to take it over, so he had no choice but to struggle on. Unexpectedly, 1 year after the eerie apocalypse, as more and more eerie ones appeared, the diner's location happened to be in a prime area. On top of that, after hiring a few skilled chefs later on, Midnight Diner kept growing, and eventually became a huge power renowned far and wide. Midnight Hotel, Underworld Bank, Midnight Hotel, these were all superpowers in the eerie apocalypse. Relying on novel dishes and delicious food, as well as the signature creations of Midnight Hotel, countless eerie beings flocked to it. In all the world, for ultimate delicacies, only Midnight Hotel existed. There was no second branch anywhere else. Once, Midnight Hotel held an event drawing lots for the qualification to a top-tier buffet, prepared by Midnight Hotel's top chefs using the finest ingredients. There was only this one chance. To obtain a free meal qualification, 10 eerie generals joined forces, willingly serving as thugs for Midnight Hotel. Midnight Hotel used them without the slightest courtesy, directly treating the eerie generals as one-time disposable consumables. And it was even said that one eerie general had fallen. Someone once did a survey. If you could go back to the very beginning of the eerie apocalypse, what would you most want to do? 9 out of 10 people would answer like this: sell everything they own just to buy the Midnight Cafeteria. Bro, I like telling the truth. The Midnight Cafeteria is just a small workshop. You're putting me in a difficult position by saying that. Chinmu shook his head and sighed, looking disappointed that someone had failed to live up to expectations. The skeleton boss froze slightly, then quickly changed its words. "Mr. Chun, what I mean is, you won't suffer a loss or be deceived by buying it. It's just that I hope you can understand, this Midnight Cafeteria is a bit expensive. I wonder whether you have the means for it." It was worried that Chinmu couldn't afford it. "Name your price," Chinmu said calmly. 200. No, 1,500,000. 1,500,000 ghost coins. The skeleton boss said tentatively. Normally speaking, although the Midnight Cafeteria was poorly run, it was still worth 2 million ghost coins. It's just that the Midnight Cafeteria is currently suffering heavy losses, so to get rid of this hot potato as soon as possible, the skeleton boss painfully cut the price by 500,000. This was already very close to the skeleton boss's bottom line price. The absolute minimum was 1 million, otherwise it would not sell. "I'll cut another 500,000. I'll pay 1 million ghost coins to buy the Midnight Cafeteria," Chinmu said. "Another 500,000 cheaper. How about only 300,000 less, you know? Cash on the spot, money and goods exchanged at the same time. Full payment with no outstanding balance held over." Halfway through speaking, the skeleton boss suddenly stopped. It thought it had misheard. What? Cash on the spot? The buyer was voluntarily asking to pay in full. It had thought Chinmu would drag things out a bit longer. Pay some kind of down payment first, and then drag it out for a few more years. It never expected Chun-Mu to be so straightforward, and this completely threw the skeleton boss off. If it hadn't seen Chun-Mu casually take out 100,000 ghost coins, it would even have thought Chun-Mu was joking around. Chun-Mu nodded. That's right, but I have one small request. The employees in the midnight cafeteria must all stay. You can't take any of them away. This left the skeleton boss dumbfounded once again. The midnight cafeteria had been doing poorly, and the employees' wages had already been in arrears for more than half a year. Chun-Mu could originally have refused to take these employees, and then he would not have had to pay the overdue wages. Naturally, the skeleton boss wouldn't want the employees either. It would just pack up and run away. As for the employees whose wages were in arrears, it simply wouldn't care. Let them become wandering ghosts and fend for themselves. And now, Chun-Mu had actually taken the initiative to say that he wanted to keep these employees and take on this hot potato himself. This meant that Chun-Mu would need to make up the employees' unpaid wages at the very least. And that was a huge sum of 500,000 ghost coins. First, he settled the 1 million price in full, and then he was willing to take over these employees too. Back and forth, 1.5 million was gone just like that. What kind of rare ultimate sucker was this? The skeleton boss looked at Chun-Mu, and the more it looked, the more pleasing he seemed. It felt that Chun-Mu was its very own limited edition sucker, born to take over this mess for it. Mr. Chun, your judgment is truly impeccable. I dare guarantee to you that buying the midnight cafeteria is definitely the most correct decision you've ever made. The skeleton boss wildly sang Chun-Mu's praises, spouting one lie after another. By its account, Chun-Mu had already become the wisest person in the world. Chun-Mu enjoyed the skeleton boss's flattery, looking as though he had been completely talked into it. But in his heart, Chun-Mu knew very well that he was being so straightforward because he had his own plans. Something originally worth 2 million, and he bought it for only 1 million, a huge bargain. Better stop while ahead. He couldn't drag this out any longer. Pay in cash and settle everything once and for all. The weird apocalypse was developing rapidly. In just 1 or 2 months, that would be enough time for the midnight cafeteria to turn losses into profits. If the skeleton boss changed its mind by then and refused to sell it to him, Chun-Mu would suffer a huge loss. As for proactively taking over the employees, for one thing, there were promising talents among them. Of the hotel's 5 future top chefs, 2 were among them right now. For another, Chun-Mu wouldn't need to recruit a new staff from scratch, which saved a lot of trouble. Chun-Mu believed that by lending these employees a hand in their time of crisis and sparing them the fate of becoming wandering spirits, their loyalty to him would definitely be high enough. When you calculated it that way, this 1.5 million was well worth it. It was practically a huge profit. Just as Chun-Mu had expected, after hearing Chun-Mu's words, the person beside him looked at Chun-Mu in disbelief. With just a short sentence from Chun-Mu, they were spared the tragic fate of becoming wandering spirits. Thinking of this, Li Xiaoxiao's eyes filled with gratitude. Mr. Chun, when would you like to make the payment? The skeleton boss asked cautiously. In its eyes, Chun-Mu had already become the sucker taking over the deal, so it had to treat him well and absolutely must not make him angry. Thus, a strange scene appeared in the eerie mission. The skeleton boss, the biggest boss of the eerie mission, was looking at Chun-Mu with a fawning expression, as if Chun-Mu were the real big boss. While it was a waiter treading carefully, not daring to violate the rules. I'll pay you right now, not a cent short. Chun-Mu stroked the ring on his hand, and with a thought, stack after stack of ghost banknotes appeared in the private room, neatly piled against the wall. A dense ghostly aura spread out. These were all brand new ghost banknotes from the Underworld Bank, exuding an unparalleled allure. The skeleton boss's eyes widened as it stared at so many ghost banknotes in disbelief. A moment later, it looked at Chun-Mu and couldn't help clicking its tongue in amazement. Are humans nowadays all this rich? Let's sign the contract. Once it's signed, all this money will be yours, Chun-Mu said flatly. All right, Mr. Chun, please wait a moment. I'll take out the contract right away. Faced with such a straightforward buyer, the skeleton boss didn't say another word and directly pulled out the contract, signing its own name. Taking the contract from the skeleton boss's hand, Chun-Mu found the paper strangely unusual, holding it in his hand. He could feel the dense ghostly aura within it. Mixed in with that ghostly aura was an irresistible power, the power of rules. In the eerie apocalypse, what stood above all other powers was the power of rules. Besides the rules within missions, there were many other rules in the eerie apocalypse. For example, the contract before him was one manifestation of rules. Once both parties signed a contract, it was equivalent to accepting the rules of the contract. And if one party wanted to violate the rules and forcibly take back the midnight cafeteria, they would be punished by the power of rules. Chunmu signed his name on the contract. The moment he signed his name, a powerful ghostly aura surged into his body. Chunmu suddenly felt something marvelous, as though he were a king who could control the entire midnight cafeteria. The midnight cafeteria had been bought by Chunmu. At this moment, Chunmu had become the biggest boss in the midnight cafeteria. His words were the rules of this eerie scene. Feeling this powerful sense of control, Chunmu was somewhat intoxicated. Now he was the master of the midnight cafeteria, and what that meant in the eerie apocalypse. Perhaps no one understood it better than Chunmu. After Chunmu bought the midnight cafeteria, it did not mean the midnight cafeteria would withdraw from the eerie scene. In other words, in the future, other people would still receive missions involving the midnight cafeteria. After those people entered the midnight cafeteria, what rules they had to follow, and the final say would all rest with Chunmu. With Chunmu's experience and knowledge, if Chunmu wanted him to die, then he would absolutely be unable to leave alive. This sense of control over power made countless people flock to it. One could imagine that as the eerie apocalypse developed, more and more people would receive missions involving the midnight cafeteria. That meant the life and death of those people would be in Chunmu's hands. In a daze, Chunmu had the feeling that he was gradually becoming one with the eerie apocalypse. If one day he could buy all the eerie scenarios and hire all the eerie beings, wouldn't that mean he would become the sole ruler in the apocalypse? Of course, talking about this was still far too distant. Chunmu was not one to aim too high. Everything had to be done step by step. With the experience from his previous life, Chunmu had no doubt that he could quickly grow Midnight Canteen into Midnight Hotel. After signing the contract, Midnight Canteen had nothing to do with the skeleton boss anymore and completely became Chunmu's territory. The skeleton boss was tactful. After taking 1 million underworld coins, he hurriedly left. At this moment, outside the private room of Midnight Hotel, only Chunmu, Li Xiaoxiao, and the girls who had participated in the mission were left. As for Zhao Mingming, she had already died for breaking the rules. The remaining girls looked at each other in confusion. They had been waiting outside the whole time and had no idea what had happened inside the private room. But they noticed that Skeleton Boss had suddenly run off with a grin on his face. And why was the female eerie manager standing beside Chunmu so respectfully? Could it be that? An absurd thought appeared in their minds. Chunmu had turned the tables and become the big boss of the eerie scenario. Before they could figure out what was going on, Chunmu spoke. In this eerie mission, Rule 4 of Midnight Canteen. He paused, glanced at the watch on his wrist. It was now 1:04 a.m. 1:04 a.m. All waiters may leave Midnight Canteen. If they leave Midnight Canteen, it will be regarded as mission completion. If this rule conflicts with any other rules, this rule shall prevail. In a calm tone, Chunmu announced his first rule and domineeringly declared that his rule would take precedence. After hearing this, the girls still had no idea what was going on and looked completely bewildered. A moment later, class monitor Yi Chushua cautiously asked, "Chunmu, does that mean the few of us can leave now?" Chunmu nodded. He still had to deal with the Midnight Canteen staff, and there was no use in having these girls stay here. It would be better to let them go back earlier. "Thank you, Chunmu." The girls thanked Chunmu gratefully, and after narrowly escaping death, they left the canteen still shaken. Sure enough, after they left the canteen, they did not suffer any punishment. This meant that Chunmu had indeed become the master of this eerie scenario. After surviving by sheer luck, it was only afterward that they finally realized that their absurd thought from earlier had now been confirmed. Chunmu, had he really taken control of Midnight Canteen? One of them gaped, unable to understand no matter how hard she thought about it how Chunmu had managed to do it. At this time, the staff of Midnight Canteen had also gathered in the canteen hall according to Chunmu's instructions. When Chunmu walked out of the private room and arrived at the hall, more than 20 eerie beings were standing there. The eerie beings had all kinds of bizarre appearances. Some were rotting corpses, some were ghosts floating in the air, and some were humanoids with 2 heads. Seeing a human walk over, the eerie beings began whispering among themselves, casting strange looks at Chunmu from time to time. As the manager, Li Xiaoxiao said to the staff, "This is our new boss, Chunmu. The boss said he will pay us the wages we are owed. And as long as everyone works hard with the boss won't treat anyone unfairly." When they heard this, the staff, whose wages had been withheld by the former boss for more than half a year, let out sharp shrieks after a brief moment of shock. In their eyes, not only had Chunmu not fired them, he was actually paying them wages. It was simply hard for even eerie beings to believe. Thinking of how harsh the former boss had been, by comparison Chen-Mu was treating them 100 times better. Don't call me boss. Call me whatever you like. Compared with the more businesslike title of boss, Chen-Mu felt somewhat unaccustomed to it. Yes, master, Li Xiaoxiao replied respectfully. Next, Chen-Mu held Netherworld currency in his left hand and contracts in his right, and began signing contracts one by one with the Eerie employees. With each contract signed, Chen-Mu gained control over them. They could not violate Chen-Mu's orders, much less harm him. At the same time, Chen-Mu sized up the employees' strength. In the Eerie apocalypse, the strength of the Eerie beings could roughly be divided into 5 levels: Ghost King, Ghost General, Ghost Chief, Ghost Soldier, and Ghost Commoner. Clearly, since the Midnight Cafeteria was still in its early stages, the employees were generally not very strong and were basically all at the level of Ghost Commoner. Among the entire staff, only Li Xiaoxiao and 2 other chefs had barely reached the level of Ghost Soldier. Not enough, their strength was still too low. Chen-Mu shook his head helplessly. He had originally planned to find an Eerie being to sign a pact with, so that he could have an Eerie being by his side for protection at any time. Don't be fooled by how many contracts Chen-Mu had signed. Pacts and contracts were different. Contracts were only limited to this Eerie scenario. Within the Midnight Cafeteria, these employees had to obey Chen-Mu's commands and could not harm him. But once outside the Midnight Cafeteria, the contracts would no longer work. If one wanted an Eerie being to obey orders forever, the best method was to sign a pact. However, a person could only sign a pact with one Eerie being, so Chen-Mu particularly cherished this opportunity. After buying the Midnight Cafeteria, Chen-Mu's strength had also improved somewhat. This was the buff effect brought to him by the Midnight Cafeteria. The current Chen-Mu already had strength equivalent to a Ghost Commoner. The Eerie beings before him were too weak. Signing a pact with them would be a complete waste. Chen-Mu did not want to waste the opportunity on low-level Eerie beings. At the very least, it had to be a Ghost General. While signing the contracts, Li Xiaoxiao left for a while. Before long, Li Xiaoxiao returned, but she was carrying an Eerie being in her hand. Chen-Mu took a closer look and realized that the Eerie being Li Xiaoxiao was carrying was none other than the Eerie customer who had just tried to kill Chen-Mu. Master, I brought it back for you. Please deal with it as you see fit, Li Xiaoxiao said respectfully. At this moment, the Eerie being was already scared out of its wits. It had thought that once it escaped the Midnight Cafeteria, it would be fine, but unexpectedly Li Xiaoxiao had captured it and brought it back. It was only a Ghost Commoner level Eerie being, very weak, and Li Xiaoxiao dealt with it with ease. Only at this moment did this Eerie being truly regret it. It realized that it had gotten itself into huge trouble. Seeing the half-scared-to-death Eerie being, Chen-Mu glanced at the respectful Li Xiaoxiao and nodded in satisfaction. Li Xiaoxiao was very perceptive. Knowing that this Eerie being had offended Chen-Mu, she captured it and brought it back before Chen-Mu even had to say anything. Chen-Mu said to the shivering Eerie being, "Don't panic. I'm a very magnanimous person, and I never hold grudges overnight." Hearing Chen-Mu's gentle tone, the Eerie being's tense heart relaxed a little, and it hurriedly began flattering Chen-Mu. However, deep down, the Eerie being felt a trace more resentment toward Chen-Mu. Even if it did not dare harm Chen-Mu, it was still prepared to cause him some trouble if it got the chance later. But Chen-Mu's next sentence made it feel as if it had fallen into an ice cave. "I never hold grudges overnight, so let's kill it tonight. I hope tomorrow's world has no trace of it." Learning that it was doomed to die, the Eerie being stopped pretending and began cursing Chen-Mu viciously. However, before it could say more than a couple of sentences, Li Xiaoxiao dragged it out and killed it. After signing the contracts and handing out the money, it was already quite late, past 2 in the morning. Amid the Midnight Cafeteria employees' send-off, Chen-Mu left the place. The Midnight Cafeteria was filled with the smell of blood, and Chen-Mu did not plan to sleep there. He was preparing to go home and rest. Right now, the Eerie apocalypse had only just begun, and aside from Eerie scenarios, other places were not considered dangerous. Although the Midnight Canteen is very safe, Chen-Mu cannot hide there forever. He needs to take advantage of the early stage of the Eerie apocalypse to quickly improve his strength. Nether coins do not directly equal strength. Otherwise, back during the Midnight Canteen mission, if Chen-Mu had possessed enough strength, he would have killed the Eerie customer on the spot. Why would he have needed to wait for Li Xiaoxiao to capture it and bring it back? So, for the next month, Chen-Mu decided to make use of his previous memories to visit some Eerie scenes in search of items, improve his strength, and sign contracts with powerful Eerie beings. After leaving the Midnight Canteen, The cool night breeze blew toward him, sweeping away Chun-Mu's fatigue. Before him lay the peaceful campus. In the distance, lights blazed brightly, and the city at night was quiet and serene. Behind Chun-Mu, meanwhile, was the blood-soaked midnight canteen. Peace and terror were separated by only a thin line. While most people had yet to notice, the eerie apocalypse was slowly descending, and the familiar order was gradually collapsing. Perhaps this was the calm before the storm. At the school gate, the security booth was still lit. Seeing Chun-Mu leaving the campus, the old man in the booth said, "Young man, studying so hard? Studying in the classroom until 2 in the morning?" Chun-Mu smiled. Studying? His grades were not very good. Before the eerie apocalypse began, although Chun-Mu's grades were not at the bottom, they were definitely not top tier either. But once the eerie apocalypse arrived, none of that mattered anymore. Academic performance, exam scores, in the eerie apocalypse, they were not even worth one nether coin. Survival. Survival is the primary goal in the eerie apocalypse. Only after ensuring survival can one think about development. "Sir, please open the gate for me," Chun-Mu said to the old man in the security booth. "Sure thing. Students as hardworking as you are rare these days." The security guard sighed with emotion as he casually opened the gate for Chun-Mu. Even after Chun-Mu had walked far away, the old guard kept marveling. Are students these days all this competitive? Actually studying until 2 in the morning before going home. If only his little grandson could be this hardworking. After leaving the school through the main gate, Chun-Mu prepared to hail a taxi home. He came to the street and looked around for a taxi. The streets in the early morning were deserted, with most people still fast asleep, and the sky was still pitch black. Sigh, not having a car really is inconvenient. I need to find a way to get one. Chun-Mu could not help but remark. After waiting for 5 minutes, finally, a taxi slowly drove over on the dark street. Before Chun-Mu could even wave it down, it stopped beside him. Chun-Mu pulled open the door and sat down in the back seat. Driver, to Wangjiang Residential Complex. Wangjiang Residential Complex was Chun-Mu's home, an old residential compound built more than 10 years ago. The apartment was small and shabby, and he had always lived there alone. This time when he went home, aside from sleeping, Chun-Mu also planned to sort through the things in his house and take away everything that could be packed up. After all, Chun-Mu had a space ring, so carrying some belongings was extremely convenient. The apartment at home was old and small, and Chun-Mu did not plan to live there anymore. With the eerie apocalypse descending and Chun-Mu possessing trillions of nether coins, he naturally wanted to improve his living conditions and choose a better home for himself. Along the way, the driver seemed taciturn and did not say a single word from beginning to end. Not only that, as time passed, Chun-Mu keenly noticed that the taxi was going faster and faster. Very soon, the speed exceeded 120, 130, 160. "Driver, you're going too fast," Chun-Mu spoke up to warn him. However, the driver still gave no response to his warning. At that moment, Chun-Mu thought of something, and his gaze turned sharp. He carefully sniffed the air and caught a faint smell of blood. On the rear window, there was also a bloody handprint pressed onto the glass. It was just that the bloodstain was very faint, and with the darkness of night, it was hard to notice. Damn, there's something wrong with this taxi. If Chun-Mu guessed correctly, this should be the infamous one in the eerie apocalypse, the Netherworld taxi. In the eerie apocalypse, humanity mainly faces threats from 3 aspects. First, eerie missions. People chosen by eerie missions will receive a small blood-colored slip of paper and must complete the task according to what is written on it. Otherwise, they will die. This kind of eerie mission generally has clear rules, and you can look for a way to survive within those rules. However, the way to survive is obscure and hard to find, and the death rate is very high. The mission Chun-Mu just took part in was of this type. Second, lone souls and wild wraiths. As the eerie apocalypse invades, many wandering wraiths will appear in the world. If a person has not violated the rules, then the wraiths cannot harm you. However, the rules of this kind of wraith are generally very unclear. Wraiths will not tell you the rules in advance. You can only figure them out yourself or rely on others' experience. For example, one wraith might disguise itself as an old lady and ask you to help take out the trash. If you help it, then the eerie being can attack you. In this situation, unless you are stronger or can successfully escape, you will be killed by the wraith. Third, eerie scenarios. In addition to entering eerie scenarios according to the instructions on the small slip of paper, people may also inadvertently walk into eerie scenarios. For example, a roadside shop might be invaded by eerie forces and turned into an eerie scenario. If you walk in, then you must follow the rules inside, complete the task, and leave. For example, this taxi right now is actually an eerie scenario. By inadvertently getting into the taxi, Chenmu had also entered this eerie scenario. However, in an eerie scenario, as long as you do not violate the rules, it is possible to survive. Chenmu had heard quite a lot about the Netherworld taxi. In the eerie apocalypse, the Netherworld taxi is an excellent means of transportation. While sitting in the Netherworld taxi, as long as you have not reached your destination, you will not be attacked by other eerie beings. It is equivalent to having a temporary invincibility buff. As for the rules of the Netherworld taxi, they are actually quite simple. If you have underworld currency, then you only need to pay according to the fare. If you do not have underworld currency, then you need to quickly notice that something is wrong with the taxi, and, before its speed has increased, open the door and jump out to escape. The Netherworld taxi starts off very slowly, so if you jump out and escape directly, aside from some minor injuries, there will be no serious problem. But the speed of the Netherworld taxi will keep getting faster and faster. Before you reach your destination, it will keep accelerating and can even break the speed of sound. Once the speed gets high enough, jumping out is no different from courting death. In that case, the only option is to sit obediently until the destination and then pay up properly. What if you do not have underworld currency to pay? Actually, it is not a big problem. Just be more careful in your next life. In the eerie apocalypse, some people would even actively look for a Netherworld taxi in order to reach somewhere quickly. As long as the rules are followed, the Netherworld taxi can bring tremendous convenience to travel. At this moment, the taxi's speed had already broken through 190, and soon it drove to Chenmu's home, Wangjiang Residential Community. Only then did the taxi driver finally speak. "We're here. Pay up. 10,000 underworld currency." 10,000 underworld currency was an enormous sum for many people. What's more, the eerie apocalypse had only just begun, and very few people had underworld currency. Asking the passenger to pay 10,000 underworld currency was something no one except Chenmu could afford. However, Chenmu in the back seat did not pay, and instead continued to sit there calmly. Seeing that Chenmu had no intention of paying, the taxi driver became enraged. Its head suddenly twisted a full 180 degrees at an eerie angle, staring fixedly at Chenmu in the back seat. "Pay or die?" Chenmu saw the driver's face clearly. This is the face of a middle-aged man, except both eyeballs have been gouged out, leaving behind two blood-red holes. Driving this steadily without any eyes at all. TSK, you weird creatures really do have some skills. Enough nonsense. If you can't pay, then just wait to die. The driver suddenly stretched out both hands, about to grab Chenmu by the neck. "Driver, may I ask, what do you do for a living?" Chenmu said something extremely punchable. The driver felt his intelligence had been insulted, and his movements grew even more violent. "Then hurry up and pay. 10,000 ghost money. If you don't pay, you're breaking the rules. You'll die, and I'm going to twist your head off." Chenmu said, "Driver, don't be in such a hurry, because in a moment you'll have something even more urgent to worry about. I'm not paying for your own good. Forgive my bluntness, but even if I paid you 10,000 ghost money, you wouldn't dare accept it. Because if you accepted the ghost money, then you would be the one breaking the rules." As he spoke, Chenmu actually took out 10,000 ghost money from his ring and waved it in front of the driver. With so much ghost money right in front of him, the driver revealed a look of longing. Mixed into that longing, however, was a trace of apprehension. Without a doubt, 10,000 ghost money was an enormous temptation to the driver. But just as Chenmu had said, the taxi driver didn't dare accept the 10,000 ghost money. He could only stare at it longingly, not daring to move. Chenmu showed that familiar smile. Whenever he saw through everything, he would always reveal that kind of smile. Then Chenmu said slowly, "As far as I know, the rule of the Netherworld taxi is that as long as you pay the fare, you can get out safely. Obviously, a trip of just a few minutes absolutely does not cost 10,000 ghost money. The 10,000 ghost money you mentioned isn't the fare at all. It's just something you use to scare passengers. If a passenger has 100 ghost money on hand, enough to pay the fare, but gets frightened by you into thinking they don't have 10,000 ghost money and chooses to give up on paying, then you can kill them. Am I right, Mr. Driver? Trying to play this little trick on me? You're still too green. The real fare is the number shown on the meter. So, Mr. Driver, please lean your body a little to the side and reveal the meter you're blocking." Hearing Chenmu say this, a look of surprise appeared on the driver's face. With those eyeless eyes, it looked Chenmu up and down. Only then did it realize that when Chenmu had asked what his job was, he was actually mocking him. What he really meant was, "Driver, you're a robber, aren't you? Jacking up the price outrageously." Damn it, this young man saw through everything. He'd been toying with me the whole time. Furious from shame and anger, the driver nearly blew his top. But after Chunmu exposed him, he could only shift his body to the side and reveal the meter he had been covering, 11.45 ghost money. Pay, receive, make change. After a string of actions, Chunmu had already finished paying the fare. Logically speaking, Chunmu should now have been able to get out of the car, but he remained seated in the back without moving. You can go now? The driver urged Chunmu to get out. The 10,000 ghost money in Chunmu's hand was an enormous temptation to the driver. As long as Chunmu didn't leave for even a second, the 10,000 ghost money kept swaying in front of the driver, making his heart itch. Is 10,000 ghost money a lot? Want your bro's big stash of ghost money? Chunmu said. Yes, of course I want it. But there's no way you'd give it to me. The driver said coldly. Everyone knew how important ghost money was, and even more so for humans. 10,000 ghost money was especially precious and rare, enough to survive many times in bizarre missions. With ghost money this precious and important, how could the human in front of him possibly give it to him? It felt that Chunmu was showing off or messing with it, so its tone was naturally cold. Who says I can't give it to you? Chunmu smiled. Not only can I give you that, I can give you even more, as long as you're willing to pay a certain price. The driver was somewhat tempted, but reason told it this was impossible. Humans couldn't be this generous. What price? The driver asked. Be my driver. I'll pay you 20,000 ghost money a month. Do a good job, and there'll even be a performance bonus. Netherworld taxis are very rare in this bizarre apocalypse. At most, a city only has one. Chunmu now lacked a driver on call, and if he urgently needed a car, if he wanted to find a Netherworld taxi in the city, he might wait 7 days and 7 nights and still not run into one. Now Chunmu just happened to come across one. The driver before him had good driving skills, and his strength was at the ghost soldier level. And while sitting in the car, he could also enjoy a temporary invincibility buff bonus. If he chartered this car, it would mean having a driver on call, along with a bodyguard with ghost soldier level strength, which was extremely cost-effective for the current Chunmu. What did you say? 20,000 ghost money a month? And bonuses too? The driver showed a shocked expression. Driving this Netherworld taxi here, he only earned a little over 3,000 ghost money a month, and his wages were often delayed. Working himself to death all year round without a single day off, he only made a little over 30,000 ghost money a year. With one move from Chunmu, his pay was increased by nearly 10 times. There were even other bonuses. And he didn't even have to work every day. He only needed to serve Chunmu alone. Could there really be such a good deal in the world? The driver was half convinced and half doubtful, looking at Chunmu suspiciously. Chunmu didn't explain much and directly took out 50,000 ghost money from the ring, adding it to the 10,000 from just now, for a total of 60,000, and handed it straight to the driver. This is your salary for 3 months. I'll pay it to you in advance. Only then did the eerie driver realize this young man in front of him was not joking. He really was that rich. The driver looked at Chunmu in disbelief and reached out to take the 60,000 ghost money. Its hands were even trembling slightly. It simply couldn't believe it had really been so lucky as to meet a tycoon who, with a single move, hired it as a private driver. Take out the contract. Let's sign a contract, Chunmu said. The driver came back to its senses from the shock, carefully put away the ghost money, and hurriedly took out its contract and signed its name. Chunmu also signed his name. At that moment, the Netherworld taxi became Chunmu's exclusive vehicle, and the driver became his private chauffeur, on call at any time. Boss Chun, this is my phone. If you need me, you can call me anytime, and I'll arrive within 5 minutes. The driver attentively handed a black phone to Chunmu, with a blood-red button on it. As long as Chunmu was in this city, pressing the blood-red button would make the Netherworld taxi exclusively for Chunmu arrive within 5 minutes. After putting away the phone, Chunmu prepared to get out and go home. The driver hurriedly got out first, went around to Chunmu's door, and eagerly bent over to open it for him, holding a hand over the roof to keep Chunmu from bumping his head. The driver knew very well that if Netherworld taxi drivers from other cities learned it had landed such a good job, they would probably explode with envy on the spot. It absolutely had to serve such a generous rich boss well. Chunmu enjoyed the driver's service with complete peace of mind. If other people saw it, seeing a fierce ghost eagerly opening a car door for Chunmu, their jaws would probably drop. Boss Chun, if you have any luggage, you can have me carry it. I'll help move it down from upstairs. The eerie driver said ingratiatingly, bent at the waist. Chunmu nodded faintly. Come pick me up here at 10 a.m. sharp. I need to take care of something. Okay, boss, don't worry. I've always been reliable when it comes to getting things done. Before long, under the driver's attentive escort, Chun-Mu returned to his familiar home. During the 5 years of the eerie apocalypse, Chun-Mu had been hiding and moving from place to place, never daring to return to his own home for fear of encountering eerie beings. Now, as he returned home once again, a familiar atmosphere washed over him. This long-lost sense of familiarity and warmth left Chun-Mu somewhat intoxicated. He took a shower, then lay comfortably on his own bed to rest and recover. At 9:30 in the morning, Chun-Mu woke from his sleep. Sleeping in his own bed at home really was comfortable, and the pillow was just the right height too. But Chun-Mu had tossed and turned and hadn't slept very well. Fortunately, he had still regained his energy. After brushing his teeth and washing his face, Chun-Mu took a piece of bread from the refrigerator. As he ate it for breakfast, he thought about his next plans. At this time, the eerie apocalypse had only just begun, and many hidden items in eerie scenarios had not yet been taken. People right now were avoiding eerie scenarios at all costs, let alone entering them on purpose to search for hidden items. It would only be a year later when people realized that, without items and without strength, death would come sooner or later, that many people would begin risking their lives to deliberately enter eerie scenarios in search of all kinds of hidden items. During this process, some people found rare Ghost King-level items and soared to greatness. Chun-Mu had been slow to realize this. It was only 2 years into the eerie apocalypse that he finally gritted his teeth and began actively exploring various eerie scenarios. However, by then it was already too late. A large number of rare items had already been completely swept up by others. Now that he had been reborn to 1 month into the eerie apocalypse, Chun-Mu naturally could not repeat the same mistake. At this time, eerie scenarios were gradually increasing, and the items inside had not yet been taken. It could be said that treasures were buried everywhere. And as someone reborn, Chun-Mu happened to know where these treasures were, as well as how to obtain them. If he didn't sweep up all the Ghost King-level items, it would practically be an insult to this second chance at life. Therefore, Chun-Mu's top priority was to seize the time and proactively enter eerie scenarios before everyone else caught on, obtain rare items, and increase his own strength. Which eerie scenario should he go to first? Chun-Mu carefully recalled which eerie scenario in his city had a Ghost King-level item, and one that he urgently needed at that. After thinking for a moment, Chun-Mu suddenly thought of a place, the Mist Museum. This had originally been the city's museum, but after the eerie apocalypse descended, it became an eerie scenario called the Mist Museum. The Eerie Duke's family lived in the Mist Museum. Every member of the family was extremely powerful. Even the servants were at the Ghost Soldier level, and the butler's strength had reached Ghost Chief level. As for the Duke himself, he was a powerful Ghost General. Aside from Ghost Kings, Ghost Generals were the strongest beings in the eerie apocalypse, and in many small cities, the strongest eerie being was only at Ghost General level. With such a powerful boss, one could imagine just how dangerous the Mist Museum was. High risk hid high opportunity, and in the Mist Museum there was likewise a Ghost General level item, the Death Heavy Armor. According to the eerie scenario's introduction, the Duke had originally been a formidable eerie general who had fought in countless battles throughout his life. Now having left the battlefield, he had retired to live in the museum. The Death Heavy Armor was the armor the Duke had worn in those years. The protective effect of armor worn by a Ghost General level commander was easy to imagine. The Death Heavy Armor came with the effect of immunity to eerie damage. One should know that items capable of granting immunity to eerie damage were rare items. No matter how sturdy man-made objects were, they could not block the attacks of eerie beings. Many strong people, even after reaching Ghost Chief level, still did not have a single defensive item. Because they lacked defense, it was common for a Ghost Chief level human to be ambushed and killed by wandering ghosts after violating the rules. In the eerie apocalypse, because of the existence of rules, defensive items are more important than offensive ones. After putting on this armor, one can become immune to the damage of ghost civilians and ghost soldiers, and largely immune to the damage of ghost chiefs. In other words, ordinary anomalies would find it difficult to harm Chun-Mu. Unless he violates the rules in a bizarre scenario, Chun-Mu will no longer fear wandering ghosts. Not only that, the heavy armor also has an overpowered effect. It can nullify the damage from violating the rules once. The cooldown time is 1 month. You have to know, there are many rules in bizarre scenarios. If you often walk by the river, how can your shoes not get wet? No matter how strong a person is, it is impossible to stay alert at all times. There will always be times when they violate the rules. At such a moment, The death-heavy armor can save one's life by nullifying the consequences of violating the rules once. This effect alone made countless powerhouses flock to it. A year and a half into the bizarre apocalypse, countless powerhouses came upon hearing its fame, hoping to obtain this item in the Mist Museum. However, although these powerhouses were very clever and able to complete the missions, the rewards for completing them were very ordinary, and not the death-heavy armor at all. Some people once tried taking on even more difficult missions in the Mist Museum, narrowly escaping death. However, after the mission ended, the Duke still did not give the death-heavy armor as a reward. In the end, some people could not hold back and went to steal or rob it directly. However, as a ghost general, the Duke's strength was not to be underestimated, and without exception, none of those with crooked intentions came back alive. In the end, someone still obtained the death-heavy armor. But the way this person got it left everyone utterly dumbfounded. After completing a bizarre mission and meeting the Duke, he directly proposed buying the Duke's death-heavy armor with underworld money. Only then did everyone wake up as if from a dream. The Duke turned out to be a down-and-out noble, and what he needed most was money. After rereading the introduction to the Mist Museum, someone exclaimed that even in the introduction to the bizarre scenario, there was actually a hidden clue. The Duke had once been a general, and now had retired into seclusion. These descriptions all vaguely hinted that the Duke had once been glorious, but was now down on his luck, a fallen noble. A down-and-out noble needs money most. Through underworld money, this person directly bought a ghost general level item, and it was called the biggest bargain deal of that year. Later, the prices of ghost general level items kept rising steadily, until even when someone offered 500 million underworld money, they still couldn't buy a single one. A down-and-out noble needs money? Perfect, I have plenty of money. Chunmu immediately decided that the next bizarre scenario he would tackle would be the Mist Museum. Speaking of which, the Duchess is actually quite pretty. As a middle-aged woman, she still retained her charm. Chunmu had done the bizarre mission of the Mist Museum before and had seen her once. Thinking of this, Chunmu decided to make a trip to the mall first and buy some gifts or something. As the saying goes, when you eat someone else's food, your words are softer. When you take someone else's gift, your hand is gentler. If he showed up at their door empty-handed, they definitely wouldn't treat him nicely. But if he brought some gifts or something, they would surely change their attitude, and buying the death-heavy armor would become much easier then. To buy gifts for anomalies, he definitely couldn't go to an ordinary mall. He had to go to a mall that had turned into a bizarre scenario. As for where there was a mall in a bizarre scenario, Chunmu thought for a long time and found it a bit difficult. He had no relevant memories from his previous life. That was normal too. Chunmu had been so short of money in his previous life, just like most people, struggling to survive in the bizarre apocalypse as if walking on thin ice. How would he have had money to go shopping? Naturally, he didn't know where there was a mall in a bizarre scenario. But this wasn't much trouble either. The driver would be here in a moment, so he could just ask it directly. It drove all around the city every day, so it definitely knew. At exactly 10 in the morning, the Nether taxi driver knocked on Chunmu's door on time. Chunmu opened the door and saw the driver looking at him with a respectful expression. In the driver's hand, he was also carrying a bag of packaged food. "Boss Chun, I'm here to pick you up. I figured you hadn't eaten breakfast yet, so I picked up some on the way and brought it over for you." As he spoke, the driver respectfully handed over the bag. Chunmu was a little surprised. He hadn't expected the driver to be so thoughtful. It seemed the conditions he had offered were extremely attractive, and the driver didn't want to lose this job no matter what. Chunmu took the bag and opened it. Inside were youtiao, soy milk, and a tea egg, and the breakfast was still warm. He had only gnawed on a dry, hard piece of bread that morning and had been wanting something hot to eat. And now it had been delivered right to his door. "Thanks, that was thoughtful of you." Chunmu nodded in satisfaction. Praised by his boss, the driver immediately felt delighted. If the boss was happy, it was happy. Only by fawning over the boss and making him comfortable could it feel comfortable too. It just didn't tell Chunmu how much of a shock the breakfast stall owner had suffered when he saw a ghost with both eyes gouged out ask for a cup of soy milk, one youtiao, and one tea egg. While eating breakfast and looking at the driver standing respectfully to the side, Chunmu asked, "By the way, do you know where there's a shopping mall? Preferably a high-end one. The more upscale the better, somewhere that sells things for ghosts. Money is no object for me." The driver believed that the boss truly wasn't short on money. After thinking for a moment, it replied seriously, "Boss, I know of a fallen mall in the outskirts of the city. The things there are all very expensive. It's a large, luxurious shopping mall that hasn't been open for long. I heard that among several nearby cities, this mall is the most high-end. Fallen Mall? Good, that's the one. Come on, take me to the mall. After finishing breakfast, Chen-mu said to the driver. Before leaving the house, Chen-mu picked out some of the things inside and stored them all in his space ring. He had no plans to come back to this shabby old place. Taking some things with him could at least serve as keepsakes. A few minutes later, Chen-mu got into the Nether taxi. The driver, wearing white gloves, respectfully closed the door and drove straight toward Fallen Mall. It had to be said, riding in the Nether taxi was truly comfortable. Fast was one thing, but the key was that it ran incredibly smoothly. And not only was it smooth, it was also damn near silent. The sounds of the bustling traffic outside and the furious honking from cars being overtaken couldn't be heard at all inside the car. When he rode in it last night, he could still smell a faint scent of blood in the car, and there were bloody handprints on the windows. But when he rode in it again this morning, the bloody smell was gone, replaced by a faint floral fragrance. The bloody handprints on the windows had also been wiped completely clean. Private exclusive service really was nice. Chen-mu finally understood why. In his previous life during the strange apocalypse, rich people specifically sought out the Nether taxi. As long as you paid enough, it felt damn good. Unfortunately, the city's only Nether taxi had been reserved by him. So no matter how rich anyone else was, it would be hard for them to enjoy this feeling anymore. In less than 10 minutes, the taxi came to a smooth stop at the destination. After getting out, Chen-mu looked up and saw a 6-story unfinished building in front of him. Only then did Chen-mu remember that there really was such an unfinished building on the outskirts of the city. When it was first being built, it was meant to be a large shopping center. Unfortunately, due to the city's development plans and other reasons, the shopping center project was left unfinished. He hadn't expected that after the strange apocalypse, this place would actually become a strange scenario. Stay here and watch the car. I'll go in, buy a few things, and come right out. Chen-mu had the driver remain in the car while he walked into the unfinished building himself. The driver had originally been thinking about going in to protect the boss, but after thinking it over carefully, it realized the boss's thinking ran deep. If the driver left the taxi, at most it only had the strength of a ghost soldier level. If it really ran into trouble, it still wouldn't be of any use. Keeping the driver in the car means that even if something happens to the boss, the driver can still drive in to rescue him. In that taxi, that's a heaven-defying buff of temporary invincibility. The boss is worthy of being the boss. His thinking is even more meticulous than that of ordinary specters. The moment he entered the Fallen Mall, Chen-mu clearly felt the temperature around him drop instantly. It was the height of midsummer, yet the temperature inside the mall was exceptionally low. Looking around, everything was cast in gray-black tones. The entrance doors of the mall were covered with a layer of blood-red handprints. The overlapping, crisscrossing prints made it seem as though countless people had tried to escape this place, only to be forcibly dragged back, leaving behind nothing but handprints from their frantic pounding. Just then, a chill approached, and Chen-mu could not help but shiver. Looking in the direction the cold was coming from, he saw a woman in a red uniform walking toward him with a smile all over her face. Her smile was somewhat terrifying. On closer inspection, the corners of her mouth were split all the way to her ears, and she was looking at Chen-mu with a horrifying grin. "Sir, welcome to the Fallen Mall. Is there anything you'd like to buy?" said the woman in the red uniform. Threads of blood trickled from the corners of her mouth, making her look especially terrifying. An ordinary person would have been scared out of their wits by now, but Chen-mu still looked completely calm. The woman thought Chen-mu had been scared senseless and worried that he might turn and run. So she stepped forward 2 paces and warmly grabbed Chen-mu's arm to stop him from escaping. "Sir, don't think about running away. After buying something in the mall, you can naturally leave this place." The woman stared at Chen-mu like a lamb awaiting slaughter. Ha, don't try this trick on me." Chen-mu revealed a smile to the woman. "Customers who buy something can leave freely. That line is rather interesting. Sir, you're very clever. Come buy something quickly. Once you've finished buying, you can leave." The woman said in a coaxing tone, urging Chen-mu to buy something.